I knew my mother-in-law hated the dress the second she saw it. Not because she said anything right away. She didn't need to. It was the way her eyes dropped from my face to the fabric, paused for a half a second too long, then lifted again with a smile that never reached them. The kind of smile that looks polite but feels sharp. The kind you learn to recognize when you've been quietly judged for years. "Oh," she said lightly, tilting her head. "That's simple." Simple. That was her word for anything she considered beneath her. I smoothed my hands down the front of the dress anyway. Ivory satin. Clean lines, no sequins, no beading, no dramatic train. It hugged my waist, skimmed my hips, fell straight to the floor like it had somewhere important to be. I loved it. I had loved it the moment I saw it hanging on the rack 3 months ago, tucked between gowns that screamed for attention. This one didn't scream, it whispered, and somehow it felt more powerful than all the rest. But power isn't always obvious to people who only understand loud. My mother-in-law, Lorraine, let out a small laugh. Not cruel, not loud, just enough to land. "Well," she added, glancing at my own mother, "I suppose not everyone wants to make a statement on their wedding day." My mother stiffened beside me, but I shook my head slightly. Not now, not today. Today was supposed to be calm. Today was supposed to be beautiful. Today was my wedding day. I had known marrying Daniel would mean marrying into his family too. I wasn't naive about that. Lorraine had made her feelings about me clear long before he ever proposed. I wasn't what she imagined for her son. I wasn't from the right circles. I didn't come from money. I didn't know how to play the polite little games she played with her friends over brunch and charity galas. Worst of all, I didn't seem impressed by any of it. That alone made me suspicious in her eyes. Still, Daniel loved me. And I loved him. We had survived 3 years of sideways comments, backhanded compliments, and that ever-present tone of surprise whenever I accomplished something on my own. So I told myself I could survive one more day. I smiled back at her. "I like it." She hummed. "Of course you do." Then she turned away, already done with the subject, already certain she'd won something invisible. I watched her go, her heels clicking confidently across the marble floor of the bridal suite, her perfectly styled hair not a strand out of place. She looked exactly like someone who believed this day belonged to her just as much as it belonged to me. Maybe more. The room buzzed with quiet activity after that. My bridesmaids hovered, adjusting straps, passing bobby pins, whispering encouragement. My mother fussed with my veil, her hands warm and steady, her mouth pressed into a thin line she only wore when she was holding something back. "You're beautiful," she said finally, meeting my eyes in the mirror. I smiled, but it felt fragile. "Thank you." She hesitated. "You don't have to take that from her, you know." I exhaled slowly. "I know. Just not today." She nodded. She understood. She always did. The truth was, this wasn't the first time Lorraine had laughed at something that mattered to me. When Daniel and I bought our house, she laughed at the neighborhood. When I started my own business, she laughed at the name. When I chose not to quit my job after the engagement, she laughed and said, "Oh, you're still doing that?" This dress was just the latest thing she didn't understand. What she didn't know was that the dress wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about me. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of soft music and warm light. When the doors opened and I walked down the aisle, I didn't look at Lorraine. I looked at Daniel. His eyes filled when he saw me, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. He looked at me like I was everything. And I was. The vows were spoken, the rings were placed, applause rose like a wave. I felt lighter than I ever had, like I'd stepped into a version of my life that finally fit. At the reception, though, reality returned quickly. The venue was elegant in that understated way Lorraine loved. Crystal chandeliers, white linens, gold-rimmed plates, everything curated to whisper wealth without ever saying it out loud. I had helped plan every detail with Daniel. We paid for most of it ourselves, not because we had to, because we wanted to. Still, Lorraine acted as if she were the host. She floated from table to table, greeting guests, accepting compliments like they were owed. When she reached our table, she kissed Daniel's cheek and then turned to me. "I suppose you are comfortable," she said, gesturing vaguely at my dress. "I am," I replied. She smiled again. "Good. Comfort is important when you're not used to these kinds of events." I felt something tighten in my chest, but before I could respond, she was already distracted by someone else. Daniel leaned toward me. "Ignore her." I nodded. "I am." But it wasn't entirely true. I saw the looks, the glances, the way some of Lorraine's friends leaned together, murmuring behind their glasses of champagne, their eyes flicking toward me and then away again. I knew exactly what they were saying without hearing a word. Cheap, plain, underwhelming, not worthy of the occasion. I didn't shrink, I didn't apologize. I held my head high and laughed with my friends and danced with my husband. But a small, quiet part of me watched the room carefully, because I knew something they didn't. About an hour into the reception, just as dessert plates were being cleared, I noticed a man standing near the entrance. He didn't look like the other guests. Not uncomfortable, exactly, just observant. His eyes scanned the room with focus, not curiosity. He wore a dark suit, tailored but unflashy. His hair was streaked with gray at the temples. He held himself like someone used to being noticed without demanding attention. I felt a strange flutter of recognition. He spoke briefly with the coordinator, then glanced at the seating chart, then back at the room. His eyes landed on me, and stayed there. I frowned slightly. He smiled. Not the polite, practiced smile Lorraine wore. This one was genuine, warm, almost relieved. He began walking toward our table. Lorraine noticed him before I did. Her posture straightened immediately, her face lighting up as if a switch had been flipped. "Oh," she breathed, smoothing her jacket. "That must be someone important." She stepped forward, intercepting him halfway. "Hello," she said brightly. "I'm the groom's mother." The man chuckled softly. "I see. I don't believe we've met," she continued, extending her hand. "Lorraine Whitmore." He shook it. "Pleasure. I'm looking for the bride." Lorraine's smile faltered just a fraction. "Well, you're in the right place," she said, gesturing vaguely around the room. "But if you have business matters, perhaps another time." He leaned slightly to the side, peering past her. "No," he said calmly. "I mean her." He pointed. At me. The air around us shifted. I felt it before I understood it. Conversations nearby slowed. Chairs creaked as people turned. Lorraine followed his gaze, then laughed. "Oh," she said, "you mean my daughter-in-law. Yes, she's right there." Her laugh lingered too long. "I'm not sure why you'd be looking for her, though." The man's smile didn't fade. If anything, it deepened. "Because," he said, stepping past her without another glance, "she's wearing one of my dresses." Silence dropped over the table like a held breath. I stood slowly, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Yes," I said. He stopped in front of me and gave a small bow. "You look even better than I imagined." Lorraine froze. "What?" she asked sharply. The man turned slightly, just enough to include her in the conversation without centering her. "I'm Matteo." A murmur rippled through the nearby guests. Matteo. The name alone carried weight in certain circles. I saw it register on a few faces, confusion turning to recognition. Lorraine's eyes widened. "Matteo, as in—" He nodded once. "Yes." Her mouth opened, then closed. I felt every eye in the room on me now. My hands trembled slightly, but I kept my voice steady. "I didn't know you'd be able to come," I said. "I wouldn't have missed it, not after you trusted me with something so personal." Lorraine let out a short, incredulous laugh. "I'm sorry, but this is ridiculous. That dress is custom," Mateo finished, gently, "designed specifically for her." The word hung in the air. Custom. Lorraine stared at the fabric she had dismissed so easily, her gaze sharper now, searching for something she'd missed. This isn't off the rack?" she asked. "No, it's not." I met her eyes then, for the first time that day, truly met them. "I didn't want a label plastered all over me," I said quietly. "I wanted something that felt like me." Mateo smiled, "And you were very clear about that." Lorraine's face flushed. "But it's so simple." Mateo laughed, not unkindly. "Simplicity is the hardest thing to get right." A few guests chuckled. Others nodded. Lorraine's fingers tightened around her clutch. "I don't understand. Why would someone like you work with her?" he finished. "Because she knows what she wants, and because she has taste." I felt a warmth spread through my chest, slow and steady. Mateo turned back to me. "I hope I'm not intruding. I just wanted to see the final result in its natural habitat." I smiled. "You're not intruding." Behind him, I could see Lorraine struggling to recalibrate, her confidence slipping as whispers spread through the room like wildfire. The cheap dress wasn't cheap. The simple gown wasn't simple. And the woman she had underestimated for years was standing at the center of it all. But I knew, even as the room buzzed with curiosity and shifting perceptions, that this was only the beginning. Because Lorraine wasn't the kind of woman who accepted being wrong quietly, and the look in her eyes told me she was already planning her next move. The silence didn't last long. It never does when pride is involved. At first, Lorraine simply stood there, frozen in a way that looked almost elegant if you didn't know her. Her smile stayed in place, but it had gone stiff around the edges, like porcelain about to crack. Around us, the room slowly came back to life, whispers breaking out in clusters, glasses clinking a little too loudly, people pretending not to stare while doing exactly that. Daniel leaned toward me. "What's happening?" he whispered. I didn't look away from his mother. "I'll explain later." Mateo excused himself politely, pulled aside by a guest who suddenly remembered an urgent question about fabrics. Within seconds, he was surrounded by people who had apparently always admired his work. Funny how admiration works like that. Lorraine cleared her throat. "Well," she said, her voice bright and brittle, "that was unexpected." I waited. She turned to me, eyes sharp now, assessing. "You could have told me." "I didn't think it was necessary," I replied. Her lips pressed together. "I'm your family now. These things matter." I tilted my head slightly. "To whom?" Her gaze flicked briefly to the nearby tables, where her friends were still watching with open curiosity, then back to me. "You enjoy embarrassing me," she said quietly. The accusation landed softly, but it carried weight. I felt Daniel stiffen beside me. "Mom." "I didn't embarrass you," I said before he could finish. "I wore the dress I wanted on my wedding day." She let out a short laugh. "You knew what people would think." "Yes, I did." "And you let me," she stopped herself, inhaled sharply. "You let me look foolish." Something in her tone shifted then, less offended, more wounded, or at least something close to it. I studied her face. For years, I had bent myself into smaller shapes to avoid moments like this. I had chosen silence because it was easier, because it kept the peace, because it let her believe she was always a step ahead. But standing there, with my husband at my side and the truth finally visible, I felt oddly calm. "I used to laugh at you," I said, "before anyone else did." Her eyes flashed. "I laughed because I thought you were making a mistake. I wasn't."
She opened her mouth, then closed it. There were too many people nearby, too many ears. Lorraine cared deeply about appearances. A scene would only hurt her. So she smiled. "Well," she said, smoothing her jacket, "it seems everything worked out." She turned and walked away. Daniel exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry." I shook my head. "Don't be." But I knew that wasn't the end of it. Later that evening, as the band started up and the lights dimmed slightly, I noticed Lorraine had gathered her inner circle at a table near the back. The women leaned close together, heads tilted slightly, hands gesturing subtly. Every now and then, one of them glanced my way. I didn't need the words to understand the tone. Daniel was pulled away by an old friend, and I took the opportunity to step outside for some air. The night was cool, the kind that settles on your skin and reminds you to breathe. I leaned against the stone railing, listening to the muffled music from inside. "Quite a night," Matteo said behind me.
I turned, smiling. "You caused a stir." He chuckled. "I tend to." "Thank you," I said, "for coming." "Thank you," he replied, "for trusting me." We stood in companionable silence for a moment. "You handled that well," he added. I raised an eyebrow. "You saw?" "I saw enough." I sighed. She's not used to being surprised. "People who rely on status rarely are," he said gently. I laughed softly. That's one way to put it. When I returned inside, the energy had shifted. Conversations stopped when I passed, then resumed in a different key. I caught snippets as I moved through the room. "Custom. Did you know? I heard he doesn't do weddings anymore. She must have connections." Connections. The word followed me like a shadow. Lorraine intercepted me near the bar. "I hope you're enjoying yourself," she said sweetly. "I am." She nodded. "Good. I just wanted to let you know that a few people were confused earlier." "About what?" She sighed, as if burdened. "About the dress. About why you would choose something so understated when you clearly had other options." I met her gaze. I wasn't confused. "No," she agreed. "You weren't." Her smile sharpened. "But people do talk." "I'm aware." She leaned in slightly. "You should be careful. First impressions last." I smiled back. "So do last impressions." She straightened, eyes narrowing just a touch. Then she laughed lightly, as if we'd shared a joke. "Of course," she said. "Enjoy your evening." I watched her go, my pulse steady. She wasn't angry anymore. She was calculating. The next morning, I woke up in the quiet of our hotel room, sunlight spilling across the sheets. Daniel was still asleep, his arm draped over my waist. For a moment, I let myself enjoy the peace. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "This is Lorraine. Call me when you're awake." I stared at the screen. Daniel stirred. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said, though I wasn't sure it was true. I slipped out of bed and stepped into the bathroom, closing the door softly behind me. "What's going on?" I asked when I called her back. "I thought we should talk." "About?" "About last night." I leaned against the counter. "Okay." There was a pause. "You should have told me." I exhaled. "We've been over this." "No," she said sharply. "You should have told me who you were working with." I frowned. "Why?" "So I wouldn't be blindsided." "Lorraine," I said carefully, "it was my dress." "And my guests," she snapped. "Do you have any idea how that looked?" I felt something harden in my chest. How what looked? Like you were hiding something. "I wasn't hiding anything," she scoffed. "You don't just happen to know someone like that." I was quiet for a moment. "You're right." There it was. "And?" she prompted. "And I didn't think it mattered." She laughed. "It matters when people start asking questions. Questions about me? About us," she corrected. "About our family." I closed my eyes. I'm not responsible for managing other people's expectations.
"You married into this family," she said coldly. "That means something." "So does respect," I replied. The line went silent. Then she said softly, "I think you enjoyed making me look small." The words surprised me. "I didn't," I said honestly. "I just didn't make myself small." That did it. "I won't be made a fool of," she said, her voice tight. "Not by you." "I never asked you to be." She hung up. I stood there for a long moment, staring at my reflection. I looked different somehow. Not changed exactly, just clearer. When Daniel woke up, I told him about the call. He sighed. "She feels embarrassed." "I know. She's not good at that." "I know." He took my hands. "I'm on your side." I believed him, but I also knew this wasn't just about sides. Over the next week, little things began to surface. A cousin unfollowed me on social media. An aunt made a pointed comment about keeping things in perspective. A friend of Lorraine's posted a photo from the wedding with a caption about true elegance that included everything but me. It was subtle, plausible, easy to deny, but it was happening. Then came the brunch. Lorraine invited us to her house, insisting it was time to clear the air. Her home was immaculate, as always. White sofas no one ever sat on, art that looked expensive but impersonal. The table was set beautifully, too beautifully. "I wanted to do something nice," she said as we sat. "Start fresh." I nodded. "That sounds good." She poured coffee, her movements precise. "I spoke to a few people after the wedding." "I'm sure you did." She ignored the comment. "There's some confusion." "About what?" "About where you come from." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She smiled thinly. "People are curious." "Curious about what?" "About how you afforded certain things, about your connections, about whether you're transparent." Daniel frowned. "Mom," she waved him off. "I'm just relaying concerns." "Whose concerns?" I asked. She met my eyes. "Mine." The room felt smaller suddenly. "I don't like surprises," she continued, "especially when they make people question my judgment." I felt a familiar urge rise, the urge to explain, to soften, to reassure. I didn't give in. "I didn't ask you to judge me," I said. She set her cup down carefully. "You became my daughter-in-law. That comes with expectations. And I became your daughter-in-law, not your project." Her eyes flashed. "Careful." "With what?" "With biting the hand that welcomed you." I leaned back slightly. "You didn't welcome me. You tolerated me." Silence. Daniel looked between us, his jaw tight. Lorraine stood abruptly. "I think you've misunderstood your place." I stood too, slowly, deliberately. "I know exactly where I stand." She laughed, sharp and humorless. "Do you?" "Yes," I said, "right where I choose to be." Her gaze dropped to my ring, then lifted again. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "I know," I replied. As we left her house, Daniel squeezed my hand. "She'll come around." I looked out the window, watching the manicured lawns blur past. "No," I said softly, "she won't." Because women like Lorraine don't come around. They regroup. And somewhere deep in my chest, I felt the certainty settle in. The dress was never the real issue. It was the first crack in something she thought was unbreakable, and she was about to find out just how wrong she'd been. I didn't hear from Lorraine for 2 weeks after the brunch. Not a text, not a call, not even one of her passive-aggressive checking-in messages that usually came wrapped in false concern. The silence should have been peaceful. It wasn't. It felt like the pause before something breaks. Daniel noticed it too. He didn't say much at first, but I could tell by the way he checked his phone more often, by how his shoulders tensed whenever his mother's name came up in conversation. He had grown up inside her emotional weather. He knew the signs. "She's thinking," he said one night, half joking. I didn't laugh. I know. The thing about Lorraine was that she never reacted impulsively. She didn't scream, she didn't throw things, she didn't storm out of rooms. That kind of messiness was beneath her.
Lorraine planned, and when she moved, she made sure it looked reasonable from the outside. The first crack appeared at a charity luncheon. I hadn't even wanted to go. It was one of those events Daniel and I attended out of obligation, the kind where everyone wore neutral tones and talked about generosity like it was a brand they were marketing. Lorraine had been involved with the foundation for years. Her name was etched onto plaques and printed in programs. I wore a navy dress, not custom, not flashy, just me. The room buzzed with polite chatter when we arrived. Lorraine spotted us immediately. She smiled, kissed Daniel's cheek, gave me a quick hug that didn't quite land. "So glad you could make it," she said. "I was worried you might be busy." "Busy?" I asked. She waved a hand vaguely. "You know, with your projects." "Projects," I nodded. "We made time." Her smile tightened. The luncheon progressed smoothly at first. Speeches, applause, light laughter. I relaxed slightly, allowing myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had decided to let things go. Then I excused myself to the restroom. When I returned, the energy around our table had shifted. Daniel was quiet. His jaw was set. Lorraine was mid-conversation with two women I didn't recognize, her tone animated. "Oh yes," she was saying. "It was quite the surprise. None of us had any idea." One of the women glanced at me, eyes flicking quickly away. "About what?" I asked, calmly, taking my seat. Lorraine turned to me, all warmth. "We were just talking about the wedding." I smiled. "It was lovely, wasn't it?" "Memorable," she agreed, "especially the dress." "Here we go. I suppose," she continued, "when someone comes from outside our usual circles, these things can feel very exciting." My fingers curled slowly around my napkin. "What do you mean?" Daniel asked. Lorraine laughed lightly. "Oh, nothing bad. Just that it must have been thrilling for her to work with someone so notable." One of the women leaned in. "It must be nice," she said to me, "to have those kinds of connections." I met her gaze. "It is." Lorraine tilted her head. "Of course, some people might wonder how that came about." Daniel stiffened. "Mom." She raised her hands. "I'm not judging. I'm just saying people are curious." I set my napkin down. "Curious about what exactly?" I asked. She smiled sadly. "About authenticity." The word dropped between us like something fragile. "I'm not sure I understand," I said. "I think you do," she replied softly. The women exchanged glances. Daniel stood. "We're leaving." Lorraine looked genuinely surprised. "Now?" "Yes." I followed him out, my heart pounding but my steps steady. In the car, he slammed his hands against the steering wheel once, hard. "That was deliberate," he said. "Yes, she's implying things." "Yes." "About you." "Yes." He looked at me then, really looked at me. "Is there something I should know?" The question hurt more than I expected. "No," I said quietly, "there isn't." He nodded slowly. "Okay." But the seed had been planted, and Lorraine knew exactly what she was doing. Over the next few days, the implications grew louder. A mutual acquaintance asked how I'd managed to work with Mateo. Another hinted that I must have had help. Someone else joked that I'd married up in more ways than one. Every comment was wrapped in a smile. Every question sounded harmless on the surface. But together, they formed a narrative. One I hadn't written. One that painted me as someone who had used connections, favors, or worse to elevate herself. It was subtle enough that confronting it directly made you sound defensive. And Lorraine stayed just far enough away from the center of it all to keep her hands clean. Until she didn't. It happened at dinner. Daniel and I were invited to his parents' house for what Lorraine described as a small family gathering. Just his parents, no extended relatives, no audience. I almost didn't go. Something in my chest told me this wasn't about reconciliation, but Daniel wanted to try, and part of me did too. The table was set simply this time. No show, no flair. Lorraine served the meal herself, her movements precise, her expression carefully neutral. We ate in near silence for a while. Then she spoke. "I ran into Mateo again," she said casually. Daniel looked up. "You did?" "Yes, at an event in the city." I felt my shoulders tighten. "He mentioned you," she continued, looking directly at me. "Oh?" I said. "Yes, he said you were very persuasive." Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" Lorraine shrugged. "His word, not mine." I set my fork down. "What exactly are you trying to say?" She sighed, as if tired. "I'm trying to understand how a woman with no background in fashion, no family ties, no public presence, suddenly convinces a designer of his stature to create a custom gown." Daniel's face darkened. "Mom." She ignored him. "It's unusual." "So?" I said. "So people talk," she replied. "There it is again," I said softly. "People." She met my eyes. "I'm people." The room went still. "Are you accusing me of something?" I asked. She hesitated, just a beat too long. "I'm asking questions. About my integrity? About transparency."
Daniel stood up. "This is enough." Lorraine looked genuinely offended. "I'm trying to protect this family." "From what?" he demanded. She glanced at me. "From embarrassment." That was it. I stood slowly. "You don't get to question my character because you don't like that I surprised you," I said. "You don't get to imply that I did something wrong because I didn't ask for your approval." Her face hardened. "You've brought attention we didn't ask for." "I didn't bring it," I replied. "You did, when you laughed, when you whispered, when you made sure people noticed." She scoffed. "You think you're above scrutiny now?" "No," I said. "I think I'm done accepting it." Daniel reached for my hand. "We're leaving." Lorraine stood too. "If you walk out, don't expect things to go back to normal." I looked at her, really looked at her. "Normal for whom?" I asked. We left. That night, I didn't sleep, not because I was afraid, because something inside me had finally clicked. This wasn't about the dress. It wasn't about Mateo. It wasn't even about class. It was about control. Lorraine had spent years defining the narrative around her family: who belonged, who didn't, who was worthy, who needed to be managed. And I had disrupted that narrative by existing outside her expectations. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A message from Mateo. "We need to talk." I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. "About what?" I typed back. "About something Lorraine asked me." My stomach dropped. I called him immediately. "What did she say?" I asked. "She wanted to know why I agreed to work with you," he said carefully. "And?" "And she implied you might have misrepresented yourself." I closed my eyes. "I didn't," I said. "I know. That's why I'm calling." "Did she say anything else?" "Yes." I waited. "She asked whether you'd mentioned your business background when you approached me." My breath caught. "Why would that matter?" "Because," he said, "she seemed very interested in proving you weren't who people thought you were." A cold clarity settled over me. "She's trying to discredit me." "Yes," he said, quietly. I leaned back against the couch.
"Did you tell her anything?" "I told her the truth," he replied, "that you were honest, direct, and entirely deserving of the work."
Relief washed over me, followed quickly by anger. "She's escalating," I said. "She is," he agreed. "And she won't stop." "No," he said, "she won't." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Then I opened my laptop. If Lorraine wanted transparency, she was going to get it, just not the way she expected, because there was one thing Lorraine didn't know, something she never bothered to ask, something she never imagined could matter. Before I ever met Daniel, before I ever stepped into his world, before I ever wore that dress, I had built something of my own, quietly, legitimately, successfully, and if she wanted to pull threads, she was about to unravel far more than she intended, because the story she was trying to tell about me, it wasn't just wrong, it was dangerously incomplete. I didn't tell Daniel right away, not because I was hiding anything from him, but because I needed to be absolutely sure of what I was about to do before I invited anyone else into it. Lorraine had spent years controlling narratives with half smiles and selective truths. If I reacted emotionally, she'd frame it as confirmation of everything she'd implied. I wasn't going to give her that. Instead, I gathered facts, quietly, methodically. I started with my own records, contracts, emails, bank statements, the kind of paper trail you build when you've done things the long way, without shortcuts or favors. I laid everything out on our dining table one evening while Daniel was at work, watching the story of my own life spread out in front of me. It was strange seeing it like that. The late nights, the rejections, the risks I'd taken when quitting a stable job terrified me. The first client who paid me less than I was worth, but gave me momentum. The second who paid me fairly. The third who referred me without being asked. I hadn't inherited success. I hadn't married into it. I hadn't borrowed it. I had built it, brick by brick, and Lorraine had never once asked how, because she had already decided who I was. The next call came from Daniel's aunt. She never called me directly. That alone told me everything. "Hello?" I answered. "Oh, hi," she said, sounding surprised. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up." "Why wouldn't I?" A pause. "Well, things have been tense." "Tense how?" She laughed nervously. "Lasha, you know how your mother-in-law worries." There it was again. Worries, always framed like concern, never accusation.
"What is she worried about?" I asked calmly. Another pause, longer this time. "She mentioned questions about your background." I leaned back in my chair. "What kind of questions?" "Well," she said carefully, "about how you afforded certain things. The wedding, the dress, your lifestyle." "My lifestyle?" I repeated. "Yes, some people feel you've been a bit private." I smiled to myself. I didn't realize transparency was a requirement. She sighed. "You know how these circles are." "Yes," I said. "I'm learning." She lowered her voice. "Between us, Lorraine doesn't like being surprised." "No," I agreed. "She doesn't." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. This was bigger than me now. Lorraine wasn't just trying to knock me down privately. She was laying groundwork, planting doubts, making sure that if things ever came to a head, she'd already shaped how people saw me. If I stayed silent, the story would be told without me in it. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her, I was going to outgrow her. The opportunity came faster than I expected. An invitation arrived in my inbox 2 days later, a networking event hosted by the same foundation Lorraine had been part of for years, industry leaders, sponsors, media.
and Lorraine's name sat proudly at the top of the committee list. Daniel raised an eyebrow when I showed him. "Do you want to go?" "Yes," I said immediately. He studied my face. "Are you sure?" "I am." The night of the event, I didn't wear anything dramatic, no statement piece, no designer labels anyone would recognize, just a tailored black dress, my hair loose, my posture calm. Lorraine was already there when we arrived. She froze for half a second when she saw me, then recovered. "Oh," she said, approaching us, "I didn't realize you'd be attending." "I was invited," I replied pleasantly. She smiled. "Of course." Her eyes scanned me quickly, assessing. No visible ammunition. That bothered her. Throughout the evening, I felt it happening. The glances, the subtle shifts. People who had previously seemed uncertain now looked curious instead. Not about the dress, about me. Because when you don't react the way someone expects, it unsettles them. The turning point came during the panel discussion. I hadn't known I'd be mentioned. I hadn't planned on it. But one of the speakers, a woman I'd worked with years ago, smiled when she saw me in the audience. And before we move on, I want to acknowledge someone here tonight. The room quieted. She gestured toward me. This woman doesn't seek attention, but she's one of the most disciplined, ethical professionals I've ever worked with. She built her company from the ground up when most people told her it wasn't possible. I felt my pulse quicken.
She never asked for favors, the woman continued. Never leaned on connections. She earned every inch of her success. Applause broke out. Not polite applause, real applause. I stood slowly, nodding in thanks. Across the room, I saw Lorraine. Her smile had vanished. After that, everything shifted. People approached me with genuine interest, asked about my work, my background, my ideas, not in a suspicious way, in a respectful one. Lorraine stayed on the periphery, watching, waiting. The confrontation came at the end of the night. She cornered me near the coat check. "I didn't expect that," she said tightly. "I didn't either," I replied. "You've been telling people things," she accused. "I've been living my life," I said. She scoffed. "Don't pretend this wasn't calculated." "Calculated?" I asked softly, like whispering doubts behind my back. Her eyes flashed. "You're turning people against me." I laughed quietly. "No, I'm letting them see me." She stepped closer. "You think this ends well for you?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "I think it already has." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You don't belong here." Something in me finally broke free. I belong wherever I choose to stand, and I'm done shrinking to make you comfortable. Her face flushed. "You're being disrespectful." "No, I'm being honest." She stared at me, breathing hard. Then she did something I didn't expect. She smiled, but it wasn't the polished smile she used in public. It was cold. "You've embarrassed me," she said, "and I don't forget things like that." "I know." She turned and walked away. That night, Daniel wrapped his arms around me in bed and held me like he was afraid I'd disappear. "She crossed a line," he said quietly. "Yes, I should have stopped her sooner." I turned to face him. "You can't protect me from everything." He kissed my forehead. "I can protect you from her. Only if she lets you," I said. And Lorraine wasn't the type to let go of control easily. The next morning, my phone buzzed with notifications, messages, missed calls, emails. Something had happened. A post had gone up online. Subtle, carefully worded, anonymous. It questioned the legitimacy of certain professionals within philanthropic circles, raised concerns about image versus reality, about appearances being manufactured. No names, but enough context to point in one direction, toward me. My hands didn't shake this time. I forwarded the link to Mateo, then to my lawyer, then to Daniel, because Lorraine had made one fatal mistake.
She assumed silence meant weakness. She assumed I'd protect her reputation the way I always had. She assumed wrong. And now the truth wasn't just going to come out. It was going to come out in full light, with witnesses and consequences. Because if Lorraine wanted a public reckoning, she was about to get one. The post stayed up for less than 12 hours. That was all it took. 12 hours for screenshots to circulate. 12 hours for people to connect dots Lorraine thought were invisible. 12 hours for the careful anonymity to unravel. Because when you've spent decades curating an image, people pay attention when that image slips. I woke up to my phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. Messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Emails marked urgent. Missed calls stacked so tightly they blurred together. Daniel sat up beside me, already reading something on his screen. "She's being named," he said quietly. I closed my eyes once. Just once. Not in fear, in recognition. This was the moment she'd been steering toward all along. "What exactly did she say?" I asked. "She didn't say your name," he replied, "but someone else did." I sat up fully now. "Who?" One of the women from the foundation, she commented under the post, asked whether the anonymous concerns were coming from the same person who'd been spreading doubts about you privately. I exhaled slowly. Lorraine had always believed influence moved in one direction, from her outward, from her downward. She had forgotten one thing. People talk to each other, especially when they realize they've been manipulated. By mid-morning, the post was gone. By early afternoon, the damage was irreversible. A board member from the foundation reached out to me directly, then another, not accusatory, not defensive, curious, concerned, and quietly apologetic. One of them said something I'll never forget. "We should have asked you instead of listening to whispers." Lorraine didn't call. That silence told me more than any confrontation ever could. She was waiting.
Waiting to see if I would go public. Waiting to see if I would retaliate. Waiting to see if I would do what she would have done in my place. She underestimated me again. I didn't post. I didn't explain myself online. I didn't release statements or defend my reputation in comments. I did something far more dangerous to someone like Lorraine. I told the truth privately, with documentation, with witnesses, with timelines. I met with the Foundation's ethics committee the following week, not because I was summoned, because I requested it. I walked in calm, prepared, unafraid. I laid everything out, not emotionally, not defensively, just clearly. Who I was, what I'd built, where my work came from, who could verify it. I didn't mention Lorraine by name. I didn't have to. By the end of the meeting, one of the committee members leaned back in her chair and said quietly, "This explains a lot." 2 days later, Lorraine was removed from her position on the committee. Officially, it was described as a voluntary step back. Unofficially, everyone knew. She had broken an unspoken rule in her world. You don't fabricate doubt where facts exist. The phone rang that evening. Lorraine's name lit up the screen. Daniel looked at me. "You don't have to." "I know," I said. I answered anyway. "Hello." She didn't bother with pleasantries. "You did this," she said. "No," I replied calmly. "You did." Her breath was sharp. "I was protecting the family." "You were protecting your control," I said. "You humiliated me." "You humiliated yourself," I answered. "I just stopped covering for you." Silence stretched between us, heavy and unfamiliar. "You could have handled this quietly," she said finally. "I did, until you didn't." Her voice dropped. "Do you know what people are saying?" "Yes," I said. "Do you?" She scoffed. "You think you've won." "I considered that." "This was never a competition," I said. "You made it one because you couldn't stand not being superior." Her tone hardened. "You've turned my own son against me." "No," I said.
You did that when you questioned my integrity instead of asking about it. She inhaled shakily. I will not apologize. I didn't ask you to.
Another pause. Then, quieter, almost unwillingly. You embarrassed me in front of people who mattered. I felt something loosen in my chest. Lorraine, I said softly, you laughed at me on my wedding day. She said nothing. You taught everyone in that room how to treat me, I continued. All I did was refuse to accept it. When she spoke again, her voice was colder. You're not welcome in my home for a while. I didn't hesitate. That's fine, I said. She hung up. Daniel found me sitting on the couch afterward, phone still in my hand. She blamed you, he said. Yes. She always will. Yes. He sat beside me. I'm proud of you. I leaned into him, finally letting myself rest. The fallout wasn't immediate. It never is. It came in subtle shifts. Invitations that stopped arriving. Conversations that went quiet when Lorraine entered rooms. People who smiled too politely, too carefully. She was still wealthy, still connected, still respected in certain spaces, but the unquestioned authority was gone, and she knew it. The final moment came unexpectedly. A month later, Daniel and I attended a small gathering hosted by one of his cousins. Casual, intimate, no politics, no performance. Lorraine was there. She looked different, not disheveled, not diminished, just smaller. She didn't approach me, didn't avoid me either. At one point, we ended up alone near the kitchen island. She looked at me for a long moment. You could have destroyed me, she said. I didn't want to, I replied. You still could, she added. I won't. She nodded once, like someone acknowledging a loss. You're not who I thought you were, she said. I know. She hesitated. I thought you were temporary. I met her eyes. I was never trying to replace you. That seemed to surprise her. She looked away. You don't need my approval. No, I agreed. I never did. For the first time, she didn't argue. We didn't reconcile that night. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We didn't pretend everything was fine. But something shifted.
Not in her, in me. Because I realized something then. The dress had done exactly what I needed it to do. Not because of who designed it, not because of how much it cost, not because it shocked anyone, but because it revealed what was already there. The people who needed hierarchy, the people who needed me small, the people who mistook silence for permission. I never wore the dress again, but I never needed to, because from that day on, I stopped dressing myself for approval. I stopped editing my story to fit other people's comfort. I stopped confusing grace with endurance. And the woman who once laughed at me, she learned something she never expected. You can't control a woman who knows exactly who she is.